Well, good day to you. It is February the 10th. I hope you're having a wonderful day wherever you are. My name is Gary Willing. It's nice to meet you. And just so you know, especially if you're hearing these videos for the first time, that is my name. It's not my YouTube channel name. I'm not hiding behind a pseudonym. That is my name. And I do that so that you can at least, at the very least, know that it's some crazy person talking to you. I'm a normal person. You know what I'm saying? I mean it like that. But I have a job, I have a life, I have a family, I have other interests that I do and hobbies and things like this. I just came across some information that I think is quite extraordinary. I've had some personal experiences with some of these masters that lead me to believe that there might be some truth to this. So I always encourage everyone to at least look into it a little bit further for yourself, okay? You don't have to do it today, you don't have to do it this week or this month, but hopefully at some point you'll think to do this and you'll at least investigate this information and see if it's true for you. Okay? Don't take my word for it. I'm not telling you to believe me. If you look in the description portion of these videos, there are links that take you to websites that talk about this information in some way. Okay? It's not all about Maitreya. Okay? So there are other things I threw in there just for interest, right? But the Share International site for good measure would be the best one to start out with to get some really good background information. And then at the end you might say, I don't believe it, right? Okay, cool. No harm, no foul. I wish you well, right? You might think that there might be some truth to it. You might think that there's not any truth to it. And then a few years down the road go, yeah, okay, now I see what, it might just make more sense to you then, right? Whatever, right? My job is just to tell you about it. But hopefully you'll look into it. None of those websites, including the Share International site, are going to ask you for your email. Before you get information, they're not going to ask you for any money or anything like that so you can go on their site, read as much as you want, and then turn it off and do with it what you want. Okay, so that's why I always encourage you to do that. Okay, now if you want to let me know what you think by posting a comment, of course you're welcome to do that. If you do have a question or two you want to ask, I will do my best to try to answer it in the next video, but the best thing to do is to post your question in the comment section, or you can email me at searchforsigns@mail.com. All right, now I did have some questions that came my way, and I'm going to start with Mark Hill. So he said, hello, Gary, and I'm going to say back to you, Mark. Hello, Mark. And Mark, I hope you're doing well. All right. Hello, Gary. Regarding our own personal encounters with odd or unusual occurrences, how is one to know whether or not these are encounters with Maitreya? And to be honest with you, Mark, there's really no simple answer, okay, unfortunately. I did interview a guy a couple years ago. His name was Dick Larson. Feel free to search back through the videos and see where he talks about it. But he came up with like 5 steps or 4 steps or something like this to help anyone understand whether they may or may not have had an experience with one of these masters. I thought it was kind of entertaining and informative to some degree, and actually based on my own personal experiences, pretty spot on. But it's not a hard and fast rule about it, okay? Now, I want to say this too, Mark. And this is just for those people who are listening other than you that maybe are hearing this for the first time, that, when we talk about experiences with these masters, okay, the times that I've seen Maitreya or one of these other masters, it was not actually them. It was a thought form of Maitreya. Maitreya was still in London. He could be doing any number of things, speaking to people, doing this, doing that. And at the same time, create a thought form, then use the term familiar, and he would create this thought form of a person that may look like Maitreya, it might not. He might be young, he might be old, he could be different racial and body makeups and all sorts of stuff. And a little bit of his energy, a little bit of his love, just a tiny bit of his wisdom is he creates, so he can kind of give it to the person in a little tiny little dose, or help him out in a crisis situation or something like that. And he's able to speak to that person in that way, but it's just a tiny bit of his energy. Now, the thing that got me thinking about it is the times that I saw Maitreya as a familiar, it changed my life. He gave me these wonderful teachings that were quite simple, and I share them with you guys on this channel all the time, and they've changed my life for the better. What's it going to be like when any one of us are actually standing in front of Maitreya, or seeing him, along with thousands of other people in an auditorium in our own city or town when he comes to visit everybody and speak to people all over the world? What's it going to be like then? Or what's it going to be like on the day of declaration when he overshadows all of humanity? I can imagine it's going to be a little bit greater of an experience than the times that I've seen him, But to get back to your question, it's just a thought for him. And then after the time is, up and he's no longer engaging with that person or the group of people, then he dematerializes it. Now, I was fortunate enough, along with a few other people in the Share International group who believed this information when Ben was alive, to be able to ask Ben, because Ben had telepathic contact with one of these masters, so he could ask his master, was that Maitreya? And I've asked him a few times. It wasn't all the time, but it was a couple times. And he said, no, that was just an ordinary person. And I was convinced it was somebody. But the weird thing is that those experiences that I thought were so real, I've kind of forgotten the details of it. But the ones that were Maitreya, I remember almost every detail of it. So, was he right? Was he wrong? He never, was really, he was never over the top in terms of telling you whether it was or wasn't. He would just say, yes, it was, or no, it wasn't. And then you could believe it or not, really, Now, the times that I saw Maitreya, I felt it was like I could be tired. I could have been tired. I could have been a little down. I'm not necessarily a depressed person by nature, as you guys probably can tell, because I'm pretty much like this even when I'm not on my YouTube channel. I'm kind of a perky person, and I'm kind of talking with strangers and all that kind of stuff in my life, I guess. But there are times when I'm tired, and there's times when I might be a little down or whatever like this. And after seeing Maitreya for whatever reason, now I'm feeling like I'm in love with everything. Not with that familiar, but love with life, love with all of humanity, the same humanity that irritates the fool out of me all the time. I love it. I love humanity, And it's like that for a time, and then it kind of fades away, and I get back into my life. And then the times when I think about those experiences, a lot of times it kind of comes back up. So that might be a way of telling, right? But there are other times, Mark, in my life, and I'll give you one example. When I was young, I was driving, and I had a flat tire out in the middle of nowhere. And I waved down a truck driver, and he stopped and helped change the tire, because at the time I didn't know how to change a tire. And for that moment, it was in the middle of the night. It was dark. I was scared. I didn't know what to do. This guy stopped and helped me, and I was like, man, this guy's my angel, right? And this is before I knew any of this information, but I can tell you it was just an ordinary person. But I tell you what, I was very, very, very thankful that he stopped. But there are other times I see homeless people all the time. A lot of times they'll look at me. A lot of times they wave at me. A lot of times they talk to me. But they're just ordinary people. I don't have a sense that it's anything other than that. And then there's other times that Maitreya has come at a time when I really, really needed somebody to help me out. And there's a different quality to it. And I can't explain it other than it's just a different quality. A kind of a humorous way of trying to explain it, you might get it, you might not, but let's try it, right? Do you know who Rowan Atkins is, the guy who played Mr. Bean? There was this really funny skit where he was at the Louvre, and he's looking at the Mona Lisa, and he gets really close, and he sneezes. Then he tries to wipe off his snot, and he ends up wiping off the face of the Mona Lisa. Now he's like scared, because this is like a, $500 million painting, right? So he draws this little stick face on the Mona Lisa, right? Looks a lot different than what it looked a lot different in this funny skit than what Leonardo da Vinci, who was nearly a master at the time that he painted the Mona Lisa, could paint it. Totally different quality, right? Still a face, right? But it's just totally different quality. Same thing with the difference between Mozart and your average pop star. There's just a different quality to the music. You might not even like Mozart as much as you like Lady Gaga or somebody else, but you can tell there's a quality to his music that other pop star does not have. Do you know what I mean? Because his was inspired by not only his own soul, but by his master. We might not be aware of it like that, but it is, right? That's why when people talk, they'll come to me and they'll say, on this channel, they'll ask me a question. What do you think about this person who claims to channel Maitreya? And I can read one sentence and tell it's not coming from anything but themselves, because it's all about themselves, right? It's not about anything other than that. And then I'll listen to Benjamin Creme talk, and I can tell it's not coming from Ben. It's coming from Maitreya. There's a quality difference. You just have to practice at it, I guess, too, right? But for most people, Mark, the millions upon millions of people who have had Maitreya experiences or met one of these masters did not understand that these masters even exist, because they had no idea that these masters exist. They weren't looking for it in that way or anything. Some people might have related it to their idea of an angel, just like I did when somebody stopped and helped me with the tire. So they thought it was an angel, right? But it was just an angel dressed in regular clothes with no wings. I don't know, right? But other people might not even think anything other than it was just, wow, that was really cool that you were there and you helped me out at that time, and that was it, right? Then, just as what happened with me, when I stumbled across this information, I started to remember those experiences. I had already forgotten about them. And I talk about it from time to time because it's quite an extraordinary experience, but the payphone message that Maitreya left on this payphone, where he wrote just how I wrote it in Japan. I used to sign my name with a peace sign, a heart, and a happy face, and then when I got back here, I didn't tell anybody about it. It was written on a payphone. It said, "To Gary," a heart sign, a peace, and a happy face, still alive and well, a cross, and it was signed the Christ. But you got to understand, Mark, when I saw this, I didn't know who Maitreya was. But yet, when I saw it, I didn't think anything of it. I didn't even think to tell people about it. I didn't think to bring a news crew in on it. It just, oh, who's Gary? And I forgot about it. And then every so often I would think about it. I was like, that was strange. You know what I'm saying? But then I would get on with my day. And then I would think about it from time to time or whatever like this. And then when I came across this information, started to read about it, people started to tell me about their own personal experiences. I started to read about other people's experiences in the Share International magazine. That's why if you go to the Share International site, you can actually read some of the stories from people. And they're quite extraordinary, most of them, right? Or a lot of them are kind of entertaining and funny, but you can kind of get the point. But it might trigger a memory or two that you had of one of these masters, just like it did for me. You're like, oh my gosh, this is what happened to me. I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. And I was fortunate enough, because Ben was alive, I was able to ask him. And he said, yes, that was Maitreya. And then it got to the point where I was having experiences from time to time, and some were real, some weren't. Some were, they were just an ordinary person, that, according to Ben. But they did say something kind of extraordinary to me, But at the end of the day, it was the quality of the energy of the time. And like I said, the closest thing that I can compare it to, it's like being in love, but not with that familiar of Maitreya, but just being in love with all of mankind, all of life, being in love with life, And it's a feeling that I didn't want to end. I kept trying to hold on to it. Like, oh, I wish I could. And then I would think about that experience. Let's say it was a few hours after I had seen Maitreya, right? And I was just like, wow, this has just made my whole day. I would love for this to be like this, and eventually it kind of fades away, kind of deal. But I keep thinking about that experience. It's perhaps given me a little bit something to learn and something to teach. And the other experience I don't really talk about, but I saw at one time, I just saw Maitreya, the Master Jesus, and one of the Master Jesus's associates. And I was driving one day, and I was thinking about transmission meditation, which is a service meditation that Ben talks about, and I used to do for years. I've stopped, unfortunately. I need to get back into it. But anyway, I really, really struggled with it. I struggled to stay awake. I struggled to keep my attention where it needed to be, and it was difficult. It's a simple meditation, but it's not easy to accomplish. And I was frustrated, because I was actually on the way to meditation this time. And I see Maitreya as this older black lady in a walker, and she is struggling for all it's worth to go up this tiny little hill. I mean, the hill it wasn't anything that most people could just walk right up and not even think that it was even a hill. But this person was really struggling all it's worth. And then the Master Jesus was a man, and his associate was a woman, both a very nice looking couple in exercise gear, and ran right up the hill like it was no problem. And was it anything? The only thing that made me think that it was something was I started thinking about it. I was like, wow, when it comes to meditation, I'm like that woman struggling up the hill for all it's worth. I cannot tell you how painful it is. But then I started thinking about some other things in my life, and I'm like, I'm kind of like that other couple where because I was running at the time too, which is kind of funny, and I'm able to run no problem. It's easy for me to run. I could lace my shoes up and I could run for 6 miles, 10 miles. It didn't matter. It was easy. And so I started to kind of look and go, that's kind of how we all are. We're good at some things. We need to work on some things. But it doesn't mean that I'm necessarily a sucky person. It just means that I need to work on those parts of my character and parts of my life. Does that make sense? And there's times that I kind of relate back to that experience, even though it was just some little random thing that happened. And I don't think I would have had that same impression of the experience had it not been Maitreya and the Master Jesus. But, who knows? And then another experience that I had, which was kind of funny, and I'm only telling you this, maybe this will trigger your memory or two, but when I was a kid, I used to smash bugs. That was like a thing that I loved to do I used to always hang out outside, and I killed a lot of bugs in my time. I got a lot of karma to burn off. But anyway, my dad used to call me the Mad Masher. That's how bad it was. And I started playing music, and I started learning and taking bass lessons from this guy named Robert, who was a very loving man. And I remember one time I was sitting in his house taking a lesson, and I want to say it was a moth. I can't remember exactly what it was. It might have been, I can't remember what kind of bug it was, but there was a bug that flew in his house, and I was like, he's getting ready to smash it. And he gently grabs it and cups it in his hand and lets it outside. And I was so impressed by this, the way he was and how harmless he was with this insect, right? That I was like, wow, maybe I should start doing that too. And then there was times that I would just squash a bug and didn't think anything of it. Anyway, I was sitting at a dinner party at a friend's house, and I see this moth flying. Yeah, it was a moth. Actually, I remember that because I remember the moth was flying in his apartment. And for some reason, I just thought to myself, I was like, if you can hear me, if you can hear my mind, moth, if you land somewhere, I'll let you out. And it went do-do-do-do-do-do-do and landed right on my knee. Oh, that's strange. So I cupped it just like Robert did for the first time in my life, and I let an insect out the door. And I remember my friend Jimmy at the time was like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "Don't worry about it, man." And then I sat back down, and a fly landed in the exact same spot on my knee. I was like, "Okay, fine, you're going out too," and I let it out. And then I had my plate, which is kind of disgusting. I had my used paper plate on the floor, and I look, and this roach comes out of the corner of the room and goes right to the plate. And I was like, "You have got to be kidding me," because they were like targets number one, man. They were enemy number one in my life. Any roach did not stand a chance if I could squash them, right? And I was like, okay, I guess you too. And I let it out. And I didn't think anything of this situation other than I related it back to a time when I was at my guitar teacher's house a few years prior to this. And I asked Ben, I said, "Was that something?" And he goes, "Yeah, the Master Jesus manifested those insects to teach you harmlessness," And I was like, oh, not something that I can really prove or relate to, but you know what I'm saying? It could be something strange like that. And, your experiences, you'll have to decide for yourself. And then perhaps if you think about it, when you see Maitreya or one of these masters, or Ben's master should be used to it by now. People used to ask him all the time. So ask him first. When you see Ben's master, whichever one of those masters is Ben's master, raise your hand and say, "Hey, I heard that you used to always get asked this question through Ben. Was this person Maitreya in your life? I got a question to ask you." And ask him, and he'll be able to tell you yes or no. How about that? But I'm kind of kidding, but I'm kind of being serious at the same time. But, you really have to, if you believe this information to be true at any level, even if it's at 1 or 2% mark, and I've said this before, I'll take it away from you. I've said this before on this channel. If you're somebody who's kind of vaguely interested in this information and perhaps ask a question or two from time to time, I would be willing to bet you've met Maitreya at some point. I can't guarantee that. I don't know. But there's something that's, and even some of the people who are totally against this information say all sorts of stuff to me about how awful I am for doing these videos and so forth. I have the same impression of them too. They just don't know it yet. You know what I'm saying? They're fighting against it. Something's fighting inside of them about this information, right? But I would be willing to bet you that they've even seen Maitreya at some point, or the Master Jesus, or one of these masters, or whatever like that. But millions upon millions of people have, so more than likely it was, but I don't know. You know what I mean? I can't answer that, honestly. And if I tried to say yes, that it was, even if I'm thinking it about for myself, I'm like, yeah, that was definitely it. I don't really know. Or if I'm thinking, there's no way. I don't even know. So that's why I don't say it. I just would say, what do you think? If you think it is, then it probably was. I don't know. So hopefully that helps. Hopefully I didn't make everything worse by confusing matters even more, kind of deal. But anyway, listen, I love you guys. Thank you so much for listening. Look forward to putting up videos in the future. You guys have a wonderful day. Take care. Remember to take action and help SOP save our planet. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to talking to you again in future videos.